Hi everyone, my name is Jono, and today I'd like to talk to you about something that often bothers Christians: biblical criticism. Like a lot of Christians, I grew up with a pretty simple view of the Bible. It was the book that told me who God was, how I should live, and what was true. Now, I knew it was more than just a rule book and more complex than some people like to think, but I didn't think much about the book itself. I more or less accepted it as it was. Then I went to Bible college and things got complicated. I started learning about something called biblical criticism. And honestly, well, at first it seemed scary because it seemed to approach this book I trusted deeply and ask uncomfortable questions. Questions like, who wrote this? Why was it written? How did it come together? How should we understand what it's saying? I think the problem is that for many of us, the word criticism sounds negative. It can sound like attacking or tearing something down, but in this context, it means something quite different. Biblical criticism simply means studying the Bible carefully, asking thoughtful questions about its history, structure, purpose, and meaning. So, if you're someone who loves Scripture but maybe feels a little nervous about some of those kinds of questions, I get it. I've been there. My goal here is to walk through different forms of biblical criticism, what they do, why they exist, and why they can actually be useful, even for Christians like me coming from an evangelical Protestant background. So let's start with part one. What is biblical criticism? We need to start by asking what criticism actually means. A helpful place to begin is thinking about how we already read the Bible. Let's take a really simple example. Romans chapter 16 verse 16 says, "Greet one another with a holy kiss." Now, in the first century Mediterranean world, that kind of greeting had a different cultural meaning than what it does for most of us today. In today's modern culture, like mine in Sydney, kissing usually implies close family, romance, or deep personal friendship. It's not how we normally greet casual acquaintances. So, when Paul says, greet one another with a holy kiss, Christians don't usually panic. We don't assume church should involve awkwardly kissing everyone in sight. Why? Because instinctively we already understand something important. Communication is shaped by culture. We recognize that a literal instruction given in one cultural setting may need to be understood differently in another. So instead of copying the exact form, we translate the underlying idea. Paul's point seems less about the physical act itself and more about genuine warmth, unity, and familial love within the church. In other words, we already practice interpretation. Biblical criticism, in its broadest sense, is interpretation, but with a magnifying glass. It's a set of methods for examining Scripture carefully, its language, history, culture, context, and purpose, so that we better understand what biblical authors were communicating and how those truths can be faithfully understood today. Over time, Christians and scholars have developed a lot of different ways of studying the Bible. Broadly speaking, many of these approaches can be grouped into two big categories: historical criticism, which focuses on the Bible's origins, context, and development, and literary criticism, which focuses more on how the text itself works as literature. Now, that is an oversimplification, but it's a helpful place to start. So next time, we're diving into historical criticism, asking where biblical texts came from, how they developed, and why those questions matter. Until then, see you next time.